northern star. That's the only point that's fixed. I once believed in love.
Night Dreams Talk Radio Network brings you The World Paranormal News with James Creechbaum. Now, the latest news.
I'm James Creechbaum, and here's some more Earth news. In India, under mysterious circumstances, 5,000 birds died near Lake Sambhar, India's largest salt reservoir. Now, experts are trying to figure out what caused the simultaneous death of so many birds. Sambhar Lake is located 80 kilometers from the village of Jaipur, southwest. In a certain season, a huge number of birds gather on the shore of the reservoir, waders, flamingos, storks, and others. A total of about 10 different species. About half a month ago, the Indians began to observe more and more dead birds. On a coastal stretch of 12 kilometers, 5,000 birds were found according to official data. The busy coastline in the past today has become a bird cemetery. A small number of surviving birds remain. There were so many corpses at some points that everyone thought that someone was dumping a pile of manure on the beach. The cause of death of all the birds is still unknown. Now, a state of emergency has been declared as highest tide in 50 years submerges 85% of Venice, Italy. The state of emergency has been declared in Venice after a chaotic high tides ripped through the city, submerging almost 85% of the land on Tuesday evening, November 12, 2019. The water level has reached up to 6 feet, which is the highest in 50 years and the second highest on record, according to the city's forecast office. 2 fatalities have been reported. Another surge of aqua alta, or high waters, is expected to cause further devastation, and that was on Wednesday the 13th. Authorities confirmed that part of the 85% of the flooded areas is the historic Basilica, which was hit for the 6th time in 1,200 years, as well as many of its squares and alleyways. One of the areas that have been hit the hardest was St. Mark's Square, which is a low-lying part of the city. Italian newspaper La Stampa reported 2 fatalities. One elderly man was electrocuted after flood swept through his home on the island of Palestrina, while another man was found lifeless in his home. The last time the tide had been higher than 6 feet was in 1966. Official record started in 1923, the Tide Monitoring Center said. The city of Venice is made up of more than 100 islands inside a lagoon of the northeast coast of Italy. Mayor Luigi Belligario said the flood levels represented a wound that will leave indelible signs, and the cost of the damage would be very high. We asked the government to help us. This is a result of climate change. That's something very scary right there. Also, Peru. Agreement to end deforestation caused by palm oil. Now, the palm oil industry is out of control as deforestation reaches record levels in the name of agricultural pursuits. And that's why Peru became the second nation in South America to agree to end the practice in 2021. Only Colombia had thus far entered into such an agreement. But the Amazon in Brazil burns. As the Amazon burns, Peru announced this week at the Expo Amazonica that it has done the same in an effort to reduce deforestation. Deforestation has only increased in recent years, particularly in the Amazon after Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro eliminated regulations to give the fossil fuel industry, the big agricultural, the freedom to clear-cut the rainforest at will, even though it serves as the lungs of the world, taking in most carbon dioxide out of our atmosphere while producing the most oxygen that we need to survive. And now the balance is only taking a turn for the worse because a series of wildfires are burning the forest to the ground, which is incredibly convenient for industries that seek a land grab for profit, especially for cattle farming and mining. In Peru, however, it's the palm oil industry that is responsible for deforestation. Tens of thousands of acres of rainforest in Peru have been destroyed to make way for big palm oil plantations, making the industry a threat to the environment and a driver of climate change. In an effort to save the remaining rainforest, the National Wildfire Federation teamed up with indigenous peoples and local governments to draft an agreement to end deforestation caused by palm oil in 2021. The Peruvian Palm Oil Producers Association signed this agreement, giving environmentalists hope that other nations will join in the effort to stop deforestation in their own backyards.
Night Dreams Talk Radio, After Dark, wants to give a big shout out to all the truckers that listen to our show.
And you're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark with our guest, Terry Lovelace, for part 2. Hey, Terry, my friend, how you been?
I couldn't be better, thank you.
So you've been staying out of trouble, I hope?
I have.
Well, that's better than getting in trouble. Have you been any strange encounters with something that's been scary lately?
Well, it's odd that you say so. I might add, I've got a bad echo here. I wonder if it could be because of my headphones.
Yeah, that might be it, because I know you're not sounding as good as you were last time you were on.
How's that?
Oh, let's see. I don't know.
Any better?
Well, I don't know. James, what's it sound like with you?
Yeah, I think he sounds better this time than he did before. Say a couple words, Terry. How you doing?
Couldn't be better, thanks. That's my standard answer. Because it's true. It's true. My echo's gone. I'm good to go on this end now.
Okay, yeah. You got to watch out for those echoes.
Boy.
Yeah.
Tell you.
Now, again.
Yeah, I've had...
Uh-oh.
I have had a couple of things I'd like to tell you about.
Oh, yeah. Let's hear about those couple of things. Let me get my cup of tea, and then you can go ahead. No, actually, just go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I got an exciting letter. I put my address in the back of my book, and I asked folks, if you've had an experience that you think is extraordinary, tell me about it. I'm not a doctor or a therapist, but, I can certainly have some empathy for your situation. So, tell me what's going on, and I promise I'll get back to you. Well, since March 10th of 2018, I've received over 1,200 replies, and about 5% of them, or about 60, are just the most incredible stories you have ever heard. And I got this from a lady who's a surgical nurse, and I'll refer to her as Julia. And Julia lives in a southern state. And she told me a story about when she was a little girl, when she was age 9. And she has a little sister, 2 years younger, who I'll refer to as Molly. And when they were 9 and 7, respectively, they were visiting their grandfather and grandmother in the country, of course, on a farm. And Grandpa had this big farmhouse, and this big front yard for the girls to play in with a split rail fence around it, and a 10-foot high berm of dirt with a road on top where he could drive his tractor. And the girls were told they could play anywhere they wanted except over the other side of the berm because there was a farm pond over there. So one day the girls are out playing, chasing butterflies or something. Grandpa's got one of those tractor wheels cut like a flower, with gladiolus growing in it. They're chasing butterflies, according to her, and just having a grand time. And they heard calliope music. And I didn't know, it didn't hit me at first, calliope. It's circus music. And the girls looked at one another and said, "Oh boy, there must be a circus somewhere." But the music was coming from the other side of this 10-foot tall mound of dirt. So they went into this argument about should we go or shouldn't we? Well, we're not supposed to go on the other side. And, Molly, who's 7, says, well, we can stand on top. Nothing wrong with that. So they did. They climbed up this berm because they were hearing this music. And when they got to the top of the berm, according to this woman, and by the way, I just for the heck of it, I verified her credentials through the Board of Nursing for this particular state. She does exist as a real person and has the credentials that she stated. So her story really rings true with me on a whole lot of levels. When they got to the top, this music was louder, and they saw, according to her, a merry-go-round that was 3 times as big as anything they'd ever seen at one of these traveling circuses. And it was 3 feet off the ground because they could see a shadow underneath it. And it was spinning. And it was covered with 1 million lights. And she says the horses looked like they were alive. But it was moving too fast for them to try to get onto. But they were just mesmerized by this thing, and the music got louder. And they laid back on this mound of dirt on the other side, where they couldn't be seen from the front yard. And they laid in the grass, and they held hands. And they just watched this thing. And then, according to Julia in her letter, boom, they're out cold. 4.5 hours pass. The police are called, the sheriff. Neighbors are called. They got a John boat on the farm pond with 2 guys with poles, trying to stir up to see if the girls fell in and if their bodies are in the pond.
Oh, wow.
No idea where they went. Girls had vanished, she claims. And 4.5 hours later, one of the guys on the boat with the poles was looking in the direction of the side of the berm where the girls had been lying, and he turned away for a moment and then raised his eyes up again and swears that they were there. They just appeared there. And they were laying on the grass with holding hands still, and they were asleep. And he didn't know if they were dead or alive. And he's screaming, "We got them! We got both of them!" And finally everyone comes running, and the girls wake up. They have no clue where they've been. Not the slightest idea. And granted, everybody is upset with them, but, they're happy to see the girls alive. And what's crazy is she tells me that they went to the farm that day, 2 happy little girls, and they came away like 2 little adults. She said that there was a marked change in her sister's behavior. Her sister never wanted to talk about it, and she says, actually, she never wanted to talk about it, and they never did. Well, Molly was, kind of carefree, and she became kind of sullen and depressed, and ended up in her 20s being diagnosed as bipolar, with bipolar disorder. And Julia, on the other hand, who had struggled academically, started school at that fall after that day at Grandpa's house, and math had always been her weak subject. She claims that when she went to school, she had no problem with fractions. The whole concept was just easy for her to grasp. And from that point forward, her grades were stellar, enough for her to get into nursing school, and then from nursing school into nurse anesthetist school, which is a pretty competitive process. So she had a pretty good life, made a very good living, and she's 69 years of age. She claims that 2 years ago, when she was 67 and her sister Molly was 65, that Molly passed away from breast cancer. And while she was on her deathbed, the girls were talking, and they held hands, and it was obvious that Molly was going to pass away soon.